Hello and welcome to PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, Ian Hartitz, and I hope you have had a lovely Week 15. I know we've had the schedule moving, players in, players out, but it still is the fantasy playoffs, and I hope, for the love of God, you are able to advance into the next round, in which case we will continue to have you covered with everything you need to know to take home that fantasy glory. As always, on this Sunday evening, I am joined by none other than PFF's own Dwain "The Rock" McFarland. Dwain, how's your Sunday?
Man, it's good. Not crazy about this slate, but it was definitely, I thought of you multiple times today.
Thank you, sir.
There was Duke Johnson. We got Drew Lock in a game. I mean, there was just a lot going on. Like, I was like, hey, this is a true Ian week. Like, getting 2 touchdowns from Duke Johnson to go on top of a season of Cordarrelle Patterson. Like, I felt positive vibes for you. But overall, like, man, like, kind of a nasty start to the fantasy playoffs. Like, the leaders, if you look up the leaderboard and you're like, who are these guys? Like, who's leading the league, this week? So anyway, yeah, man, ready to jump into it. Actually, quite a few notes. Like, a lot of times when we get this deep in the season, there's not that much new from utilization. We have, I think 6 or 7 key takeaways today of some things that could be changing or are changing.
And of course, man, on my very first podcast I did with the PFF Fantasy Football Podcast, episode 1 last, it would have been like 2 Julys ago or whatever. I did this quick spiel. I was like, hi, my name is Ian Hartitz, and I listed a few things. I was like, I'm president of the Cordarrelle Patterson fan club. And one of the things I said, if people can go back and listen to it, was that Duke Johnson is a 3-down RB, and we shouldn't let people like Hugh Jackson and Bill O'Brien change our opinions of that. The U's all-time leading rusher has always had this ability. It was great to see him get that. But Dwayne, we got some other games to get to before I just spend 15 minutes gushing about Duke Johnson. Let's start things off with the Steelers taking down the Titans 19-13. They covered as a 1.5 point favorite, under cashed at 43.5. Maybe the most disgusting game of the entire day. There were a lot of them, so I don't want to necessarily crown this one, but Dwayne, the Steelers had 168 total yards of offense, and they won. Like, Deontay Johnson led in quotations the way with 48 total yards. And I'm not saying it was on him or any of these guys. Titans have been playing a lot better defense in the second half of the year than the first half, but 168 total yards of offense. That's why every single guy you start in this one is gonna dud. So Najee Harris, 18 rushing yards and then only 8 receiving yards. Hopefully you had a first round bye already if you were starting him. And yeah, disappointing game from Deontay as well. Pat Freiermuth only finished with 37 total yards. Just note that he got concussed, I believe in like the second, or I think it was the third quarter, so certainly wasn't able to play the entire game. And yeah, man, only touchdown, Big Ben from the 1-yard line. And hilariously enough, like, I'm not sure. I think it happened after this, because the way the broadcast cut it up, Ben scores his touchdown, and then they show him in sweatpants sitting on the stairs, like in the tunnel. It looked like he went there afterwards, man. Maybe he was just so overcome with joy from scoring that rushing touchdown that he had to go sit, have a moment to himself. Either way, disgusting one here. Dwayne, do you have any real takeaways here from the Steelers?
Yeah, only one really, and it's that we've just got to be careful with Claypool. I think he gets a downgrade this week in the utilization report. Been kind of monitoring it, but 3 weeks in a row now, Ian, where we've seen his routes under 70%. So routes per dropback, 68%, 55%, and 59%. So when you're dealing with an offense that isn't that prolific to begin with, as you're outlining, as we've seen in this game in particular, one of their worst outings of the season. But just knowing that there are multiple mouths to feed, and it's just not a high, it's not a high ceiling offense. No. Like, it could have a spike game, but like, we don't expect it every week. So with Claypool, I think we just really got to look at him more as that low end wide receiver 3. Heck, if you're in like a 10-8 team format, he's a wide receiver 4 at this point. But if you're in a full 12, like, you can still keep him at that end of the wide receiver 3 range, but you just have to know he's very boom bust at this point.
Very boom bust indeed. Final note here. Steelers did win. I usually try to give the winner my PFF Lily special stat, and it is in regards to Najee Harris, who, let's face it, hasn't had a very good rookie year in terms of efficiency. Now, we've seen the volume going into this week. Only Jonathan Taylor had more weeks as a true RB1. He hasn't been a disappointment in fantasy by any stretch of the imagination. With that said, 43 running backs with at least 100 carries this year. Najee is 35th in PFF rushing grade, tied for 18th 15th in missed tackles forced per carry, but just 42nd in yards per carry, 31st in yards after contact per carry. And then in terms of yards per out run, Dwayne, 36 out of 48 qualified running backs. So, Javonte Williams, man, was PFF's #1 running back coming out by the college experts. I'm not saying I was sitting here going super far against the grain, although I liked him too. Either way, right now, I think if we had to redo the draft with everything we know now, I'm assuming Javonte would be pretty clearly the #1 RB from the 2021 class. Now, Dwayne, other side of the ball, another horrifically disappointing offensive effort from the Titans. We did get one rushing touchdown from Tannehill at the goal line, got his nice little finger roll, which I always remark on being very cool, and I continue to maintain that. But other than that, man, it was D'Onta Foreman going for 108 yards on 22 carries, also managed to chip in 2 catches for 27 yards, and that was really the only offensive performer worth even a little bit of a damn. We did see Nick Westbrook-Ikini drop about a 40-yarder in his hands. Perfect throw. It's an 80-yard house call, but for this one, it was a little bit overthrown, so still hit him in the hands, should have been caught. Just realized, like, best case scenario, I think Tannehill has a nice little 80 yards and a touchdown onto his tally. Wasn't meant to be. Why was Nick Westbrook the leading target with 7 targets? That's because Julio Jones, unfortunately, re-injured the hamstring and got ruled out. So, Dwayne, I wouldn't be shocked if Julio is out of the picture. We have over a month of evidence now without Derrick Henry, without Julio and AJB, that Tannehill cannot consistently throw the ball. Can we at least rely on Foreman a little bit? Because over the last 3 weeks, it's been more good and bad for him.
Yeah, so, I mean, it is still a 3-way committee. 39% of the snaps to Foreman, 36% to Dontrell Hilliard, 29% to Jeremy McNichols, who may have got another concussion. I was watching Red Zone today, so it bounced away after a weird hit. Like, he had taken one hit, and then as he was falling, he got hit again.
I saw him get banged up earlier in the game. Okay, that one. He came back. I'm
was he back?
Sure.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. So then it's pretty much like it was last week. But 54% of the rushing attempts did go to D'Onta Foreman, which is what we had seen for the previous weeks, except last week. Last week, we really saw all 3 guys get involved. So I don't know that we can really trust it a ton, Ian. I feel like it's kind of an ebb and flow week to week, but just know that all 3 backs are going to be involved. If it works out well, you'll see about half of the carries go to Foreman, but not involved in long down and distance, 0% of that, 20% to Dontrell Hilliard, and Jeremy McNichols had 80% of the long down distance work. And then as far as the 2-minute offense, 50% to McNichols, 33% to Hilliard. A little bit of work there for Foreman, 17%. So basically, the way I look at this, Foreman, he's 50% basically of the early downs, rushing attempts. Then you got the change of pace back in Hilliard, and then you have the passing down back, which is Jeremy McNichols. So you really got all 3. And then when you get inside the 5, it's Ryan Tannehill for the layup.
Bills took down the Panthers 31-14, covering as a 14.5-point favorite, over cashed at 43. Not Josh's best game, but we've seen this throughout the year. He's been up and down in real life. Fantasy continues to be far more good than bad. Had the 4 sacks, had a pick, had a fumble, also threw 3 touchdowns, 2 of which went to everyone's favorite flex streamer this week, Gabriel Davis. Funny tweet from Scott Pianowski, who's been on this podcast a couple times, does great stuff over there at Yahoo Sports, where he just tweeted, "You know who liked Gabe Davis today? Everybody," which is very freaking true. So, hey, I hope you guys benefited from it. But, sometimes we have these, in DFS and everything, when there's a play that has 50% ownership, that's called chalk. This was a chalk pickup. There's nothing wrong with that. Just spare me, some of these victory laps I see on Gabe Davis. It was Josh Allen's, number 2, number 3 receiver. Of course we were going to like him, particularly in a game against the Panthers, where Dwayne and I told you throughout the week, with Gilmore likely on Diggs, with the man coverage stuff, this was always looking like a good spot for Davis. Dwayne, it could have been even bigger though, man. 5 catches, 85 yards, 2 scores. No one's complaining about that, but earlier in the game, 50-yard bomb from Josh Allen was overthrown by probably 6 inches. Otherwise, we'd be looking at 3 touchdowns for Davis. So the other big takeaway, which ended up coming to fruition, Dwayne, this was something we talked about earlier in the week, with Josh Allen banged up. He still ran the ball 3 times for 24 yards, but we saw really the largest emphasis ever on Devin Singletary as a rusher. Obviously, game script had a lot to do with this. 31-14. This game was never really close, 17-8 at halftime. But man, to see Devin Singletary rack up 23 touches, 96 yards, and find the end zone, we had to make sure that Zach Moss was a healthy scratch. We've seen this backfield go up and down throughout the year. I'm not saying this is going to be consistent the rest of the way, but if this holds, Dwayne, we finally have a usable fantasy running back in Buffalo.
Yeah, we do. And so we've seen Moss be a healthy scratch, 2 out of the last 3, or maybe is it 3 out of the last 4 games?
Only one that wasn't was the crazy snow one game.
Yes, yeah. So 3 out of 4 games we've been without Moss, and then knowing that Allen could be a little bit limited moving forward. Today he only handled 7% of the design rushing attempts for the team, and to your point, it was really all about Singletary. 93% of the snaps, 81% of the routes, 86% of the rushing attempts, 100% of short down a distance, 85% of long down a distance, 100% of the 2-minute offense. Wasn't involved in the passing game, but I think that's a week-to-week thing. If we have weeks where Allen isn't running, I think he could easily get involved in the passing game. Last week, that's really where Singletary came through, was catching the check down passes. Only 3% of the targets today, but we know he is a viable receiver out of the backfield. And Matt Breida, man, he was the other guy available. Only 4% of the snaps, 4% of the rushing attempts. So it really was all Singletary. Now, who knows if it'll stay, if the utilization will stay this strong. But I think at a minimum, we know we do have a lead back, right? Yeah. If it stays this strong, we don't know. But even if Singletary can stay in that 70 to 80% range of the snaps, stay in that 70 to 80% of the rushing attempts, and then he's going to have games where he's going to pick up receptions. Like, it's going to happen. So again, the routes were fine. 81% of the routes, like, that's elite. In a route, 81%, like most backs, is really good to get to 60%. 70% is like, Alvin Kamara range. 81% is like off the charts. So yeah, big upgrade today for Devin Singletary. He'll be a top topic in the utilization report tomorrow. Also on the Bills, Gabriel Davis, just real quick, 90% of the routes per dropback and 45% of the air yards today. I just like seeing him out there. I know the Bills still just weren't truly clicking. They ended up winning this game, pretty easily. But like, they didn't have a huge game passing. Like, now there were 3 touchdowns for Josh Allen, but I just like the idea of Gabe Davis giving them, that vertical presence, and again, he's showing off that he's got more gear. He has more gears than just, the long ball. So I think that's good for him. But I think, this could really be good for the Bills, like having another player out there that can truly stretch the field. He has to gain respect, and then that can open up things for Stephon Diggs. Because really, if you think about it, Diggs, and if you think about Emmanuel Sanders, they're kind of playing the same role, right? It's all like, hey, win with your route running. Not that that's bad, but it's all intermediate, underneath, a little bit of deep stuff. And you got Cole Beasley running out of the slot. You don't throw to your backs much. You're running with your quarterback. I think it just helps to have someone that the defense knows could get over the top of them.
And remember, Davis did not practice all week. I mean, we heard pretty early last week that it was doubtful that he was going to be able to play. Would not be shocked if at a minimum, Manny Sanders is going to miss another game, or at least be limited enough where they go back to Gabriel Davis. I mean, he really has been their second most efficient receiver this year. Yards per route run, Diggs is at 1.92, Davis 1.81, then Beasley 1.42, and Emmanuel Sanders 1.31. Also goes to show, man, especially in today's NFL, awfully important to have, more than 1 or 2 capable wide receivers. I think we even saw that in the Green Bay offense over these past few weeks, how much, added help that's been getting Marquez Valdes-Scantling and Allen Lazard back and balling. So that's how it is sometimes. I know Eric Eager has done some great work in the past showing that, sometimes these wide receiver groups are only as strong as your weakest link once you get into playoff time. Now, Dwain, a passing game that doesn't quite have the same upside as what we see in Buffalo is the Carolina Panthers. Cam hasn't been terrible all year, but he was terrible in this one, and he's probably going to turn in a top 5 fantasy performance regardless, because as we say on here all the time, you can be a good fantasy player, not a good real life one. Ended up throwing for a touchdown, but man, that was just like a pretty simple angle route to Amir Abdullah. Otherwise, 4.1 yards per attempt, and that includes that touchdown. I'm not trying to take that away, but yeah, 4.1 yards per attempt. He took 4 sacks, he threw a bad pick, and he also put the ball on the ground twice, albeit the Panthers did not lose it.
So I was thinking about this today, Ian. If you wanted to build scoring rules for a fantasy league, you can't just take away the points for the rushing, right? That's got to be there. Like, the way you have to punish, you have to get, and a lot of leagues won't want to do this, but kind of like Scott Fishbowl does. You would have to do something with completion percentage, right? Or incompletions. That's how you would, really punish people like Cam Newton, Taysom Hill. If folks are interested in doing that.
I think sacks could be -1.
Yeah, it's got to be something where you can't take away the rushing upside, of these guys. It's got to be really, because where they're failing is in the passing game, right? In the running game, what they're doing is actually good. I mean, Newton handled 46% of the rushing attempts today for the Panthers. That led the team. That can still be a positive. But yeah, you'd have to do something where you're negative scoring, hitting them in the passing game, sacks, things like you're talking about.
if you think about it, I mean, a quarterback running the ball should be seen as like a complete pass. Like you're 100% on it. It's like we don't give them enough credit in real life, I think, for rushing. We almost give them too much.
Well, and defenses hate it. Like defenses don't want to have to worry about that. Like, so it's a positive because you hear the defense coordinators bitching about it. Like, so that's what tells me it's a good thing. Like for ultimately the team is when I hear the coordinators, they're like, yeah, this guy's a nightmare, right? Because I gotta allocate a spy to him. We can't run man coverage as much because if we do, we turn our backs. He takes off. We can't run like a lurk. It has to be a spy instead of like a lurk, like back there watching all the crossing routes and stuff like that. So anyway, more of an off-season topic probably, but just wanted to hear your thoughts.
No, I like it though. We'll definitely dive into that a little bit more come June or something like that. But yes, not a good day for our guy Cam. He's back, but we'll see how long that happens. He was good enough to keep PJ Walker from getting on the field, but just realize, the leash could not be shorter for Cam these days, and that's going to be rough when they have to go face TB12 in the Buccaneers.
So remember, the role that they said PJ Walker has is the 2-minute offense. Mm-hmm. The Panthers didn't run the 2-minute offense today. So for whatever reason, there's 0% of their snaps were in the 2-minute offense. So that may be why we didn't see Walker.
Down 31-14. You didn't think to maybe speed it up a little bit?
Didn't think to. I think basically they thought the more plays they ran, the worse it would be.
Unfreaking real. Well, DJ Moore, 6 catches, 48 yards, led the way receiving 11 targets. Could have had a huge day. He got wide open deep for a potential 50-yard score. Unfortunately, was badly underthrown. At this point, I would put him right there with Terry McLaurin as the favorite to be their generation's Andre Johnson, Allen Robinson, a great wide receiver that unfortunately, when you start looking at all the quarterbacks they played with, you just have one long list of scrubs. All due respect to Cam Newton's career. I love Cam. I have for the last 10 years. Unfortunately, he has not been the same guy since suffering that shoulder injury halfway through the 2018 season.
Looking at this year's class versus what the Panthers had that they could have gone after last year,
that's why you don't go bargain shopping at QB, man.
Do what?
You don't go bargain shopping at QB. Otherwise, you end up with Sam Darnold and freaking 2021 Cam Newton.
That life comes at you fast.
My goodness. So, but also what Cam's doing, and we've talked about this throughout the year in terms of, the effects that dual threat quarterbacks can have on their team's running backs. Cam, 15 carries. Chuba, 8. Amir Abdullah, just 4. Chuba looked okay rushing, but the problem is he's got Cam vulturing. He's got Cam really just working as the RB1 a lot of weeks himself. Then we also have Amir Abdullah stealing the targets. So, Dwayne, this is why, before the bye, even on the waiver show, we really weren't prioritizing Chuba Hubbard. Maybe he finds a way to fall into the end zone, but man, at this point, DJ Moore, I think, is the only player in the offense that you can start with even a little bit of confidence. And even then, man, we've seen this now. The floor could not be lower. It truly is a shame compared to what we saw in this offense the first month of the year.
Yes, he is it. And it's only a volume play, right? Yeah. You know that he's probably not going to have his upside uncorked just because of the limitations of the offense. But yeah, you can't use the backs. It was split up again, 53% of the snaps to Abdullah, 47% to Chuba Hubbard. Routes 52% to 31%. Rushing attempts 29% to Chuba, but Cam again led the team 46%. And the short down and distance, so that is 1 or 2 yards to go, third or fourth down. It also would capture a lot of your rushing attempts inside the 5 at the goal line. 100% of those attempts went to Cam Newton, as they have been. So Hubbard doesn't even really have like a home. Like there's nothing you can say about him like, oh, that's his. Like he's not the passing down back. He's not the early down back. He doesn't get to work inside the 5. Basically, he's a between the 20s. Maybe we'll think about handing it to you back, and you just can't use that.
All right, Texans, Jaguars, 30-16 in favor of Houston, who covered as 6-point dogs, over cashed at 40. Turns out removing Urban Meyer didn't magically solve every single problem for what is still a very terrible football team, and now in prime position to get that number 1 overall pick for the second year in a row, with the Lions managing to shockingly win this week. So with the Texans, we don't need to spend too much time on this. Backfield remains more or less a mess. We did see Rex Burkhead get 16 carries this week. David Johnson just 6, Royce Freeman free. But once again, 3 running backs consistently involved. And hey, if the Texans are going to play, we've seen this before, like week 1. The other game the Texans inexplicably won, that's escaping me, my memory for a second. They've had positive game script in like 3 games this year. We see the guys put up good volume numbers, and we once again see them not have any sort of upside that's worth chasing in the first point. So Burkhead had an RB20 finish earlier in the year. Freeman got an RB22 one last week. Those are the only games we've seen any of these running backs crack the top 24. So yes, the Burkhead volume, it's 17 touches. It's hard to find that out there on the waiver wire. I understand that, but man, only the most desperate situations should you be turned to any of these
17 touches for 47 yards.
Exactly. And this was, again, best case scenario, matchup, game script, everything just didn't quite work out. Credit to Davis Mills. I mean, I think he's probably exceeded expectations based on the environment he's in throughout this year. And we've seen, I think, more so earlier in the games when they are able to stick to their script, him have some extra success. But even in this one, man, the 209 yards and 2 touchdowns, I think a lot of that should be credited to Brandon Cooks. 102 yards and 2 scores for Mr. Cooks. He is now on pace this season for 97 catches, 1,150 yards, and 6 scores. We've seen the duds, but as that pace, tells you, we have seen the upside as well. So, Dwayne, it's been like this for months. Brandon Cooks is the only guy we can even somewhat trust in this offense, and that's how it's going to be the rest of the year as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only lesson we've learned, is if any time a player is not supposed to play, I guess we just play them now. I mean, Burkhead went from being out, he was immediately just said he was going to be out. Yeah. That's the first time I can remember where, as of Tuesday, players out. Then it went to questionable, and then they're actually the lead back, 61%.
Not just active, but the lead back. It's nuts.
Yeah. The only other thing on the Texans, we were, had some dynasty folks. We were kind of getting excited about Brevin Jordan. Not sure what happened there. I know he was questionable coming into the game, but he was active. But he did not register one single snap today, and I think that was one of Andrew's favorites. As far as just kind of a punt play at tight end, which I did like. I used a couple times today, so that was a good donut. I liked it.
At least you saved the salary. He cried as he finished his bottle of whiskey. With the Jaguars.
Mostly went with Mark Andrews, so I feel fine.
There we go. With the Jaguars, Trevor Lawrence, dealt with a lot of drops out there. This wasn't his worst game of the year. Once again, though, 0 touchdowns. The fact that we were talking about this in the PFF office, the fact Blake Bortles could throw for 35 touchdowns in garbage time and be this fantasy relevant quarterback, and we have Trevor Lawrence, Zach Wilson, not even putting up numbers in garbage time. That's the concerning part. So we're going to need to see some major turnarounds from these guys in the offseason. Need to get them some more receivers, need to get them some better coaches. Again, it's just been really, to me, surprising that even in the end of games, haven't been able to see these guys put up some level of production. Laviska Shenault did flash a few times, week high 4 broken tackles as a receiver. Is he a fantasy asset? Absolutely not. Finished with under 40 yards, but
don't tempt people, Ian. Come on, what are you doing?
Just thought I would point that out before quickly moving on. Marvin Jones also with another disappointing day. I would just note that he could have had a fairly easy 11-yard touchdown early on in the game, but Trevor unfortunately sailed the ball out the back of the end zone. James O'Shaughnessy, 4 catches, 60 yards, just 4 targets though. We saw Treadwell, Shenault, and James Robinson work ahead. So really, Dwayne, we've wanted one thing out of this Jaguars offense all year long, and that was just for James Robinson to be featured. We did have Carlos Hyde out with the concussion in this one, but at a minimum, over these next few weeks, we can get back to firing up Robinson as a top 15 option with this sort of usage.
Yeah, man, 84% of the snaps, 71% routes per drop back or pass play, 76% of the rushing attempts, 50% of the short down and distance. That's where Ogunbowale was out there a little bit, but long down and distance, 64% and 77% of 2-minute offense. They will get Carlos Hyde back, so we'll have to see what happens when he's back. But based on what the coaches told us this week, about the way they want to use Robinson, I think this is here to stay, Ian. And yes, even on the Jaguars, you can get a high-end RB2 whenever you have this type of utilization.
Cowboys took down the Giants 21-6, covering as a 12-point favorite, under cashed at 43.5 points. Better game from Dak Prescott. It wasn't last week. Still left a lot to be desired, though. We saw him take 3 sacks, just 1 touchdown, 217 yards, was not able to clear even 6 yards per attempt, and he also did lose a fumble. Seemingly the one time he really tried to throw something deep downfield, wasn't able to get the ball out. And yeah, man, that was just a surprising part. This Cowboys offense, to start the year, one of the most explosive groups in the league, didn't even have a single completion today of more than 20 yards. So CeeDee Lamb didn't help matters. I think he was the only receiver on the week that PFF charged with multiple drops. But yeah, just overall, still not seeing the best version of this Cowboys offense. At least we did have Tony Pollard back in action and looking healthy, man. The bursts seemed to be there. 12 carries, 74 yards. You could once again clearly see that he is a dynamic back in space. Also credit to Ezekiel Elliott. Scored a touchdown from 13 yards out. Also managed to chip in 3 catches for 20 yards. So not pretty. I really wish Zeke wasn't, a volume-based RB2 at this point that needs to score touchdowns. With that said, we're still going to have an awfully hard time fading anyone that's going to be seeing 20 combined carries and targets in one of the leagues based on the whole year, not necessarily the last 4 weeks, based on one of the league's better offenses. But that's the thing, man. I mean, I guess Gallup, he did have a chance at like a 40-yard catch down the sideline. Dak underthrew it. There's a safety coming over. But everything has just been so much harder in recent weeks than it was earlier in the year. And I think you can see that reflected specifically through Dak. Weeks 1 through 6, 87.6 PFF passing grade. Weeks 9 through 15, coming back from that calf injury, just 69.2. 16 touchdowns, 4 interceptions before, 9 touchdowns, 6 interceptions since. Yard per attempt has dropped from 8.4 to 6.5. Everything has been tougher in this offense, man. So at a minimum, we can, rest easy thinking that they'll improve as he continues to get healthier. Hopefully they get Tyron Smith back in a few weeks. At least all the wide receivers are in the picture for right now. But, we'll want to see them figure this out before they get to the playoffs and truly are clicking on all cylinders. But, hey, if the defense keeps playing like they're playing, man, maybe they don't need to be quite at 100%. Shout out to Trayvon Diggs. 10 interceptions this year. He's given up a bunch of touchdowns and yards too. But when you get 10 interceptions, you cannot slander that man. So everyone out there,
watching this game, and I swear to you, he was baiting Glennon the whole game. Like, he looked like he was covering Kenny Galladay. He looked like he could have covered Kenny Galladay with one leg. Like, he was just the whole time, like, anytime he was over there on him. Well, and you saw the pick. Like, it's just kind of like, hey, I'm in front of Kenny Galladay. Like, it's like I have him so covered up. It was not like that was a great decision by Glennon. But, Diggs has been playing great. I mean, 10 picks, awesome. And really, it's just the front, Will 7, for Dallas right now. But really, I mean, it's all about, you got Lawrence back, at the edge. You've got Randy Gregory, and then you got Parsons. With those 3 guys, it's just a lot, for any offensive line to handle. And especially for a quarterback, more of a journeyman type like Glennon. You're going to need some mobility. You got to be able to make quick decisions, read the fronts, all that kind of stuff. And the Cowboys, the schedule's pretty easy. Like, so they should clinch the division, I'll knock on wood. But as far as their offense goes, man, like, what I'll say is, like, with the defense playing so well, there is a chance, like, if Dak can get healthy and we could see the explosive offense we saw earlier in the season, by the time they get to the playoffs, like, they could be really dangerous. But if they can't, I think even with the defense playing good, while it can keep you hanging around, like, to compete with Aaron Rodgers and to compete with whether it's, the Rams, the Cardinals, whoever, it's going to be, you're going to have the offense too. So Dak's going to have to get things right. As far as Zeke and Pollard go, it was 62% of the snaps to Zeke, 41% to Pollard. So really kind of back to what we saw in the couple of weeks before, Pollard was out, which was a little bit of a reduced role for Zeke, a little more work for Pollard. And really what they've said in the media down here for the last couple of weeks is they just want to keep both guys healthy. So they don't want to overwork either one of them. So I think this is probably what we'll see through the end of the season is around the 60-40. And it's probably somewhere like 55-35, 50-40 as far as rushing attempts between the two guys. Really, Zeke is still handling most of the passing down work, 67% of the long down and distance, 100% of the 2-minute offense. Both had 3 receptions today, but Zeke was definitely out there more in the passing down situation. So I think when I look at Zeke, he's a mid-range RB2 right now. He could, if he was healthy, he would definitely be more like a low-end RB1 in this offense. Pollard is he's an RB3, with some upside, but this injury is enough, though, that you kind of got to treat him a little bit with kid gloves because you don't want something to flare up like in the game, right? And then you lose him. So I think of him more as like that mid-range RB3, but he certainly, showed, to your point today, that gear to be able to make, some longer plays and to be able to potentially give you that long scoring option. 25% of his carries today went for 10 yards or more, so explosive rate of 25%. Stuffed on 0% of his rushing attempts. Yards after contact today, 4.2 for Tony Pollard. As far as the receivers go, Lamb for the 3rd week in a row since having all the guys back, 71% of the routes. So he's been the lowest of the 3, each of the 3 weeks that he's been back, but it hasn't really mattered because when he's on the field, he's getting more targets. Targets per route run, 32% for CeeDee Lamb versus 11% for Gallup and 10% for Amari Cooper. So Lamb is still the clear option to own in the passing game, for the Cowboys.
It is weird how much they've really shifted him back into the slot. Like, I'm not denying that having him in the slot is bad. Like, okay, he probably should be the guy in there between him, Gallup, and Cooper. But man, just 6 total snaps out wide this week, only 7 last week. I mean, it wasn't that long ago, man. Like in the middle of the season, he was only having that many snaps like in the slot compared to out wide. So seeing them totally change his role around, I think it could. We'll need to look at the average target depth numbers, Dwayne, because I feel like Gallup has been racking up the air yards over the past few weeks compared to CD. So if anything,
CD 30% of the air yards this week, 33% to Gallup. Average depth of target, though, to your point, Gallup 16, ADOT 7. 6.7 for CD Lamb and a 5.5 for Amari this week.
Sheesh.
Yeah. Hey, next year, though, here's the good thing. With Lamb, we've seen that he can play outside. Now, not that we really doubted it, but we got a good sample of it this year. And Gallup will probably be moving on. Hopefully he lands with a team where he can get more work as well. But, I mean, Lamb, he's a guy that we'll be talking a lot about this offseason, about how high are we going to rank him. We'll probably have some good conversation around that.
I believe it's going to be awfully high, but yes, we will certainly get to that later. With the Giants, Mike Glennon, terrible, 3 interceptions, has had stretches this year where he hasn't looked this bad. Today it was not one of them, and we did end up seeing Jake Fromm come in the fourth quarter, make a couple of okay throws. Like he completed a 36-yard pass to Kenny Golladay. You would like to see those things from the wide receiver. You're paying $64 million to be there. But yeah, come on, we can't expect anything from this Giants offense. Similar thing to Jacksonville. Like we got rid of Jason Garrett, and I was like, hey, hopefully this just fixes everything. It turns out, the Jims and Joes might have a little bit more to do than the X's and O's in some of these terrible offensive situations. Unfortunately, Sterling Shepard ruptured an Achilles. Hate to see that. Please get better. Truly, I think one of the more underrated route runners in the league when he is fully healthy. Just hasn't really been the case throughout this year. And yeah, man, other than that, just awfully brutal. My biggest takeaway, Dwayne, continues to be I am so disappointed that I cannot tell who has the ball between Devontae Booker and Saquon Barkley. And I get it, because Saquon made like one of the sickest catches of the day. Like I'm not trying to say like as a route runner, catching the ball, Saquon's special in that, like he always has been. But when they get the ball in their hands, I can't tell the difference. And it's 26-28, but man, I wish that it was so much more clear which guy was more explosive. Unfortunately, it's not. And Dwayne, it seems like maybe it's, lost season. Giants are now 4-10. Saquon's going to, contract after this. We don't want to necessarily just give him 30 empty touches a game. But at this point in fantasy, man, like he's just going to continue flying down the ranks because here comes Devontae Booker more and more involved in this offense.
Yeah, man. Last week, when we looked at Barkley, it was really once the game got way out of hand, he had still been out there for like 90% of the work. This week, it was kind of spread out all through the game where it was Barkley and Booker. So 59%. Almost more like a Zeke Pollard split, like almost exactly. 59% of the snaps to Barkley, 44% to Booker, 53% of the routes to Barkley, 34% to Booker, 64% of the rushing attempts to Barkley, and 32% to Booker. You did see Booker also handle the long down and distance work, and we've seen him doing that more lately, 79%. And then he split the 2-minute offense with Barkley, 50-50. They also split the short down and distance carries. Barkley much more active in the passing game. His targets per route run today, 42%. And with Shepard out, if we don't get some of these other underneath options back pretty quickly, that's probably where we see the biggest boost to Barkley's game. He had 8 targets today, caught 4 of those for 24 yards. But to your point about the explosiveness, like the data backs it up as well. I mean, 10 yards or more, so explosive rate, as far as rushing attempts, 25% for Devontae Booker today, 0% for Saquon Barkley. So, I mean, Booker was able to take his 8 carries for 74, where Barkley had 15 for 50. Barkley did have the really good catch, as you mentioned. So, I mean, I think we just kind of got to, it is what it is at this point, and it really has been for a while. Like when Barkley injured his ankle and that freak accident, like he's just not, he was finally working his way back. And then now, like that was just another setback, and the Giants are not very good. So I just don't think we can count on a true every down role. I think he'll lead this backfield, but I think it's going to be probably a little more evenly split moving forward, just because it's kind of like, what's the point?
Upset of the day. Lions took down the Cardinals 30-12. Detroit covered as 13-point dogs. Obviously undercashed at 48. This one reminded me of that Cowboys-Broncos game. Now I understand the Lions aren't really as good as the Broncos or anything, but I just kept waiting and waiting and waiting for Kyler and company to figure it out, and they really never did. We got a Christian Kirk touchdown at the end, but this one really was all Detroit from start to finish. Give some credit to Jared Goff. He had some pearls out there, man. Amon-Ra St. Brown, beautiful 37-yard touchdown on a wheel. We have now seen him turn in 8+ catch performances in 3 straight weeks, and he's scored twice in those. Wide receiver 6 in week 13, wide receiver 26 in week 14. I would be surprised if he's not a top 10 receiver again after everything is said and done in week 15. So, Dwayne, I got a ton of start-sit questions about Amon-Ra St. Brown. You know, I tried to go with him a lot, but is wide receiver like 3 too low at this point? I mean, I know we can't trust everything in this offense, but as long as Hawkinson's out, Swift's out, Jamal's out, like there's only one ball to go around. Goff has looked competent enough throughout the year, and particularly in recent weeks. I mean, this wasn't supposed to be a great matchup, but Amon-Ra St. Brown, he's getting so much damn volume, man. Do we do the unthinkable and move a Detroit Lions wide receiver inside the top 24 down the stretch? Or is this a situation where, like, hey, we got Amon-Ra St. Brown getting some volume. We got Craig Reynolds getting more volume, 26 carries, 112 yards, but we just also need to recognize this was kind of rare to see them play with positive game script again. Maybe this is, more of a blip on the radar than something to truly think is going to persist over these final weeks.
Yeah, I like Amon-Ra St. Brown. Third consecutive week, 30% plus target share. He had 42% today with 11. I will be upgrading him to a low-end wide receiver too.
We're going it. We're doing top 24.
You have to. I mean, there's just too many targets. And look.
Great day to be great.
Yeah, it's not like Jared Goff hasn't supported slot receivers before. Not to say that this is Cooper Kupp, but Cooper Kupp had great seasons with Jared Goff. Not what he's having this season. But yeah, I think Amon-Ra St. Brown is getting enough work, and you hit the nail on the head. Swift's not there to work underneath. TJ Hawkinson's not there to work intermediate. So really it is St. Brown. And the thing I like about him is he's done well against man coverage and against zone coverage. His targets per route run are strong against both, which whenever you look at the really good receivers in the league, they do that. There are others that are more hit or miss every week that sometimes we struggle to explain. And what you'll notice is they get 15% targets per route run against zone. They get 30% against man. Or it's typically the opposite. They'll see a little bit more like 20% against zone. And then whenever they get manned up, they only get 12%. So it's good to see that he's actually, and it's a small sample still, but for what we have, that's what we have to go off of. And so I think every indicator right now for St. Brown look really good.
Moving on to, actually real quick, Craig Reynolds went for over 100 yards, 26 carries, got banged up early on. Anytime you see a running back wearing number 46, your expectations are pretty low. But to his credit, couple times showed a little burst there, had a long at 27. There was one run in particular where he had a nice spin, kind of reverse field. With that said, Dwayne, it looks like that they're still keeping Godwin involved. And Jamar Jefferson. I would think that Jamal Williams, at a minimum, has a chance of coming back down the stretch run. Yeah, when the Lions can be up 17-0 at halftime and Craig Reynolds can run the ball 20+ times, of course he's going to be a great fantasy asset. But as I pull up their schedule here down the stretch, how confident are you in potentially treating him as, again, a high-tier running, maybe not a high-tier running back, but at least as maybe a recommended start against the Falcons and against the Seahawks? Because those aren't bad, man. And if we're getting 20+ touches per week, even on an atrocious offense.
I just think it's a matter of the Lions. The thing that you said early on is the key. They led the whole game. Yeah. And that's been the key. The Lions actually, and I've written about this in the utilization report, they've wanted to be more of a run-balanced offense when they grow up. They just never had a chance to grow up this season. This right here is actually what, Jay Moyer and other folks, when they talked about Jamal Williams early in the season and how much they liked him, this is the role Jamal Williams would have had if the Lions were good, right? And so, this is what we could have seen. Now, to Craig Reynolds' credit, he's playing really well. 12%. Of his carries are going for 10 yards or more, 3.8 yards after contact. So, he's surprised. He's definitely opening some eyes. Now, I think if you get Jamal Williams back, that's going to make things really nasty. Then you're either going to end up with a committee because they're going to give Jamal Williams touches, right? Or it's just going to all go to Jamal. So I think that's the key. They're both battling for the same role. And then you've got a situation where you really need the Lions to trail. They haven't, or to lead the game. They have not done that all season. Only a couple of times have they been able to play like they did today. Actually, only one time has been able to lead as much as they did did today. So yeah, I think we just got to keep an eye on Williams. If we hear Williams is going to be out for some reason, the Lions could just choose not to play him. Like, what's the point, of playing a player that you could get hurt late in the season? At this point, if a player gets hurt, right, and it's an ACL or something like that, they're missing time next year, potentially, right? So I know players heal a lot quicker than they used to, and medicine's come a long way, but I don't see the need to risk it. So if we heard Williams was out, I would be okay ranking Reynolds. He'll either be a low-end RB2 or more like that high-end RB3.
I think that's fair. And just real quick on Jamal, because I have seen some discourse across social media suggesting like, oh my gosh, the Lions paid Jamal Williams, and then we got the Cardinals paying James Conner like this 1-year deal. That's such a better idea to pay Conner instead of Jamal Williams. Like, guys, there's a little bit of a difference between being in the Cardinals offense and the Lions. Jamal has actually averaged an extra half yard per carry than James Conner this year. Obviously, he doesn't have the same amount of touchdowns because Kyler freaking Murray isn't his quarterback. But hey, in this one, it was better to have Jared Goff as your quarterback. So Kyler and company, again, to me, it felt like that Cowboys-Broncos game where they never got going until the end of the fourth. With that said, though, Dwayne, I think that Broncos game for the Cowboys was a little flukier than this one. That would be the difference. Like, the Lions just kind of beat the Cardinals' ass, for lack of a better word, throughout this one, man. That was what was happening. They looked a little bit soft out there, to be honest with you, and that really, you could see that with Reynolds having all the success he did on the ground. So Kyler, real disappointing game in fantasy, only 3 rushing yards. And again, this is not like something that has to do with the injury. He has looked as fast as ever since coming back from that issue. Just didn't have the rush attempts to really get going today. 257 yards passing, 1 touchdown, 1 pick. Luckily, he did enable Christian Kirk. I answered a ton of start-sit questions with Kirk, and I was getting nervous about 30 minutes into the game because he was not doing well. He did finish with 9 catches, 94 yards, and a score on a team-high 12 targets. We also saw Zach Ertz really get a lot more involved than past weeks. We were kind of thinking that he could be the new red zone target hog without DeAndre Hopkins involved. We had some uncertainty with Ertz being questionable going in this one with a hamstring injury. Ultimately, though, 6 catches, 74 yards on 11 targets. Shout out to A.J. Green, 4 catches, 64 yards. Didn't pull away by any stretch. And with that said, though, nice contested catch downfield. And he also made a nice little play where he broke a tackle or two, man. He has looked better over the past 2 weeks. Now, facing backup Rams, cornerbacks, and the Lions. So I'm not saying that he's, been toasting great competition. At a minimum, though, A.J. Green has far surpassed basically everybody's preseason expectations. Not completely washed just yet. Only real sheesh from this one goes to Antoine Wesley. Towards the end of the game, Kyler hit him for a potential 30-yard score, but he got 1 foot down and his second foot hit the pylon, which does not count as a touchdown, so he was out of bounds. I'm not necessarily blaming Wesley. I think Kyler probably could have put the ball a little more in bounds. He was kind of let out of bounds to go get the ball in the first place, but just keep in mind that we were inches away from Kyler adding a 30-yard touchdown to the tally. Dwayne, the big takeaway, though, utilization speaking, was the return of Chase Edmonds. And we got to take it with a little bit grain of salt because, James Conner was fairly banged up with the knee injury coming into this. With that said, Chase Edmonds was back, man. It did not look like that they said, hey, Conner, you've played so well over the past 2 months. Here's the job. It looks like we're back to a 1-2 punch.
Yeah, 44% of the snaps to Conner, 39% to Edmond. Now, Jonathan Ward was out there at the end with Colt McCoy. So 15% of the snaps went to Colt McCoy, in garbage time, and 15% went to Jonathan Ward. So I'll have to dig into it a little deeper tomorrow, like what did it look like up until that point. But here's the positive for Conner, is Conner had not been the lead back like before Chase Edmonds got hurt. Remember, it had really been Chase Edmonds as the lead back, even though he wasn't getting as many carries as Conner, and Conner was really more the change of pace. So it does look like Conner's going to lead the backfield. To your point, we'll have to see how much the injury matters. But Edmonds is involved enough, Ian, that I think you got to downgrade Conner to that mid-range RB2, low-end RB2. You're probably going to need a touchdown, to make it work, because here's the biggie. 67% of the long down and distance went to Chase Edmonds. They didn't utilize the 2-minute offense. Weird. Yes, another team that trailed the whole day. And some of this stuff gets changed with the way it gets charted. So the data we're sharing with you guys is hot off the presses. Hasn't been through the whole QA process and everything yet. with Edmonds, he's definitely got a role. So I think it does hurt Connor. And we just got used to having Connor in an every down rollie in, and you knew that wow, this guy can give me 30 points a week. So you're not getting that. Now you're hoping for 15 to 20, and you're probably going to need a touchdown to get there. The good news for Connor, he was still utilized in the passing game. Targets per route run, 12%. Only had 4% of the targets total, but just wasn't out there for as many of the routes. We had seen him up there in the 60-70% range. Now only 33% of the routes for Connor. So Chase Edmonds, though, I think really you just have to, at this point, I know early in the season you and I were pretty high on him because his utilization and everything was there. Probably just an RB3 at this point. I don't think you can grade him any higher than that. Now we could change that next week, but my guess is Connor stays the lead role and Chase Edmonds really plays the role that he's probably best at, which is he's really the passing down back and a change of pace back to James Conner, but gets a little bit more than your typical, change of pace kind of guy.
Real quick, potential, it's not going to be huge, but it could help him get a few fantasy-friendly targets. Rondale Moore did come up with an injury report with an ankle injury. So as we've talked about, Antoine Wesley replaces Hopkins in 3 wide receiver sets. I understand Rondale has been off the fantasy grid for quite some time now, but we've seen flashes where they do use Rondale in the backfield in that low A-dot passing role, and that is where Edmonds also thrives. So
that's another big storyline for the offseason. Rondale Moore is going to have to develop. He's going to have to develop into more than just this behind the line of scrimmage gadget player. We need to see him used more down the field.
For the love of God, Cliff, you've already ruined Isabella. Don't take Rondale Moore from us, too.
Come on, man. Run after catch doesn't mean that they have to catch it 2 yards behind the line of scrimmage.
Thank you.
They could catch it 3 yards past the line of scrimmage.
It's legal. It's legal in America, man.
It is legal. I guarantee you Kyle Shanahan probably wouldn't be using him like this. Well, that's probably not the best example. Kyle Shanahan would find a reason to bench him. But anyway.
That's true.
Christian Kirk, upgrade for this guy. 96% of the routes. The only challenge for Kirk all year, Ian, has just been there's so many mouths rotating in and out, these mouths that you got to feed. And as we were on good weeks, we would see route participation numbers around 70%. Now getting a 96%, his targets per route run have been the best on the team all season, along with Zach Ertz. So now, if you're going to be out there 90 to 95% of the routes and you're going to get this kind of targets per route run continuing, we saw lots of goodness from Kirk in that stretch before whenever we were without Hopkins. So I think we'll see that again. And man, nice for him because he's getting used all over the field. He gets used underneath, gets used intermediate, but he's also the best deep threat that they have right now on the team. So 12 targets, 9 receptions, 94 yards, and a touchdown. So you did a good job today making the recommendation of Christian Kirk as the start. I think looking at him right now, I don't know what I'll do. He's definitely, in my opinion, right now, he's a high-end wide receiver 3, but he could, if he continues this and does this another week, he could be heading in, if some of you folks play these playoff challenges where you got to draft a team, Kirk's probably a wide receiver 2 in that format.
Yeah, I'm checking right now. I think where did I have him this week? Had him wide receiver 27 this week. I think that sounds probably about the same going forward.
Yeah, I think that's about where I had him too, somewhere right in there.
And if we can get any level of consistency, obviously ceiling is the moon for anyone that can be lucky enough to be Kyler Murray's #1 pass game option. Dolphins took down the Jets 6 in a row for these guys. Absolute madness. Good for them. Dolphins 31, Jets 24. Jets did cover as a 10-point dog over cashed at 42. Tua, man, he does this, and we've talked about how bad the offensive line is. Truly, second worst pass blocking grade in our PFF database, going all the way back to 2006. But he throws 1 or 2 just terrible picks a game, and I think, if you're just a red zone viewer, which I don't blame you, I wouldn't, if this wasn't my job, I wouldn't be trying to watch every snap of Dolphins Jets either. But when you kind of look back and look at the more complete picture, you see it wasn't as bad as it, really looks on the stat sheet sometimes. 2 interceptions, though, and they were ugly. The second one really, didn't lose them the game because they won, but throwing, a bad late pick 6 to the flat in a game that, you had a 2-score lead in, not good. This was like Dak Prescott interception against Washington levels bad that we saw from last week. So not the best day from Tua. It was helpful to see him condense his targets around Mike Gesicki and Devontae Parker in the absence of Jalen Waddle. Both guys had 8 targets. Parker managed to find the end zone on a short slant, also caught 4 balls yet again for 68 yards and looked pretty damn good out there. So, hey, we did see some good balls from Tua. Parker had a nice 37-yard game, 27-yard gain from Isaiah Ford. Tua just dropped in a that bucket over the shoulder. That was a great throw. But again, it's just for a 1 week thing. Hopefully our guy Jalen Waddle is off the COVID list ahead of next week, and then it's going to be tough to treat Parker as anything more than either I would probably say upside wide receiver 4. I think it'll be tough to kind of squeeze him in that top 36 once Waddle manages to return. Perfectly fine flex option, though, in deeper leagues. And as for Mike Gesicki, we continue to have top-tier usage, just not making the most out of it. So he's going to continue to kind of meander around that tight end 1 borderline. I get it if you're not thrilled to keep going back to the well. But Dwayne, why have I not started with the main event? Duke Johnson's world. We are just living in it. 22 carries career high, 107 rushing yards career high, 2 scores on the ground, also chipped in 20 receiving yards. This was not empty. I understand the Jets' league worst defense and fantasy points per game allowed to running backs, but Duke had 81 of his 107 yards after contact and now joins a list featuring only Nick Chubb and Dalvin Cook as players to force at least 10, count them, 10 missed tackles on rush attempts in a single game this year. And bro, I think it's even further. I need to cheat and when we have our fancy PFF Ultimate, the first thing we have to do when we go into it is hit no plays off, because that takes away holdings and things like that. Plays that didn't count. No plays. But Duke had this 20, 25 yard run that got called back on a hold where he broke 3 or 4 tackles in one place. So truly, even if I didn't spend the last 5 years standing for Duke Johnson every chance I got on Twitter, I would still be hard pressed to say anything other than excellent performance from the U's all-time leading rushers. So Dwayne, we need to wonder though, Myles Gaskin got off the COVID list late. This was coming out of the bye, but maybe Miami did feel like he wasn't quite ready to go. To Gaskin's credit, 10 carries, 54 yards. He was hardly a liability out there himself. What do you kind of make of this backfield moving forward? Because as much as I would love to sit here and say Duke Johnson, RB1 season is here to stay, I do think we probably could see this split up a little bit more evenly in future weeks.
Yeah, I think the thing that we have to, acknowledge, though, is that this has been one of the toughest backfields to figure all season anyway. This is a team that kept Malcolm Brown involved way too long until he forced their hand with an injury. I think the good news is Duke, at least, has performed well enough, in my opinion, that he shouldn't be behind Ahmed. He shouldn't be behind Malcolm Brown, Patrick Laird, any of these other types. To me, they should isolate this thing down to Duke Johnson, Myles Gaskin. I think it is a bit difficult to read the situation because, like you mentioned, you got Gaskin coming off the COVID list late, so it could have been a conditioning thing. They may have just said, hey, we're just going to basically use you more, as a change of pace guy, today, and, in the future, you're going to get more of a featured role back. But at the same time, they have not fully ever at any point this season gone all in on Myles Gaskin. Yeah. So it's not like they love Myles Gaskin. I think they like the idea of having a committee. So I think we'll probably see these 2 backs remain involved. We'll wait and we'll have to see. The next thing you know is they'll send him back to the practice squad first thing on Monday, and we'll be like, okay, what the hell's going on? So we'll have to keep an eye on it, but I think it's a fluid situation. I know we'll have to talk about it on the waiver show. Right now, looking at the rest of the league, you're looking at him, you're looking at Craig Reynolds, they all kind of have similar questions, right? A lot of it depends on what happens with the other backs on the roster. But, I feel like I need to run down the stat line since it is Duke Johnson. You don't get these moments all the time, Ian. But
thank you, sir.
58% of the snaps, 28% of the routes. So that is where Myles Gaskin was slightly ahead at 38%. But rushing attempts, 59% for Duke, 26% for Myles Gaskin. Short down and distance, 67% to Duke Johnson, only 33% for Myles Gaskin. And then whenever you look at the underlying metrics behind the rushing attempts, you hit on some of this, but this is percentages. 45% missed tackle force per attempt. Yards after contact, 3.7. Point of attack change, meaning a lot of times this is to do with bad offensive line. You got to redirect, 18%, but his explosive rate was still 18%. So those are carries of 10 yards or more. And that's often hard to do when you've got a high POA change, keeping those explosive plays high. Only stuffed 9% of the time, whereas Myles Gaskin was stuffed on 20% of his carries. So yeah, man, Duke had a really good game. It's one I got to let marinate a little bit more, and we got to figure out what we're going to say on the waiver wire show. Because I know Ian's just going to say, hey, you got to drop all the money.
This is my man. Like, you would think that based on this and like Cordero Patterson's year, that I would just be rolling in fantasy success. Not saying it's been a bad year by any stretch, but I really do try hard not to let my personal feelings get in the way of this. So no, like, I didn't have 100% Cordero Patterson best ball exposure. I was hesitant to get on that train early in the year. We try to keep it objective here.
Did you use Duke today in DFS at least?
No, Gaskin was back. I used Gaskin.
Oh, man.
It sucked.
I wish you would have been like texting me saying to use Duke. I used Michael Carter. And anyway, we'll get to that in a minute.
Best money I've ever donated to DraftKings. It's all good. With the Jets, Zach Wilson, just another pretty meh performance. Took 6 sacks in this one. He had 1 6 scramble where he broke like 3 tackles, but it seemed like that almost gave him like too much confidence to keep running around the rest of the game. Just again, like Trevor Lawrence, the fact that he can't even put up numbers in garbage time. Not saying there was a ton of that in this one, but that really has been my biggest like negative takeaway from this situation all season long. Hopefully he can grow up in a big way ahead of 2022, because it continues to be borderline impossible to trust any of these pass game options, particularly in the post Elijah Moore, Corey Davis era we got going on. Jameson Crowder easily led the way with 8 targets this week, but we continue to see Denzel Mims, Keelan Cole, and Braxton Berrios involved. Early on in the game, they were force-feeding Berrios. They actually gave him like a toss sweep at the goal line. It looked like he was planning on throwing it for a second, but then took it in for a rushing score himself. So that's why Berrios is on the stat sheet with a rushing score. But Dwayne, we talked about Crowder. He's nothing more than, a hate yourself wide receiver 4 at best at this point, I think. That's a new one. That's a good one. That's so much better than most of my usual industry standard lingos.
That's better than the Girl Scout with a gun in your door.
She always works her way in this damn podcast. We got to give her a name at some point. But the big story is this rushing attack. And it was disappointing, man, because Michael Carter, I know he didn't have the best stats, 8 carries, 18 yards, but he looked pretty damn explosive early on. He's been, I put out these charts every week where on the y-axis, it's like missed tackles forced per carry. X-axis is the yards after contact. And you see Carter like in some really good company. He's been one of the league's slippier backs. We were getting the reports saying like, hey, he's going to come back to a featured role. The Jets seem to be behind it. We even got Ty Johnson healthy scratched, but ultimately, Dwayne, Tevin Coleman stole the show, and he was productive, to be fair. But man, maybe it was because it was Carter's first game off IR, but I'm guessing this utilization is not ideal for anyone thinking that they might have, an RB2 on their hands and Michael Carter down the stretch.
Yeah, sorry for the deep inhale. Prayers up for Chris Godwin. Just took a direct hit to the knee.
No.
Yeah, so bent in a weird way. They had just done the big slot thing too, where they put up Reggie Wayne, Hines Ward, and Larry Fitzgerald in the Arians offense, and the next play this thing happens. But anyway, for Michael Carter, sorry, Ian. I know. I need Chris Godwin healthy. But Michael Carter, 54% of the snaps versus 37% for Coleman. So he did lead the team today. Routes was also out there more, 47% versus 25%, but they really shared the work on the ground. 38% to Carter, 38% to Tevin Coleman. And you have to get Austin Walter involved. Ian. It's written, like it's hard coded, like into the offensive coordinator. Like it's just binary numbers, and it's in there. Like you can't break the code. It's got to happen. 10% of the rushing attempts to Austin Walter, and you got 73% though the long down and distance to Carter. 100% of the 2-minute offense. So he does have the passing down work back. You had Ty Johnson as a healthy scratch today. So I think there are positives there with Carter. But at the end of the day, it's like okay, we've got 3 backs that are involved, really 2, but there's one that's enough to be a nuisance. Because think, if that makes Carter's rushing attempts 50% instead of 38%, we feel a little bit better, right? So that 10% just from Walter is a pain in the ass. And it's a bad team. Like they can't move the ball. Like they're just very inefficient. So it's tough anytime you've got a 3-way committee on a bad team. That just makes it tough to get much mileage out of it from a fantasy perspective. But I am encouraged by the passing down usage. So I think that's a positive. And maybe it's his first week back. Maybe we can get back to, now we're running out of time here, right? We only have a few more weeks, but maybe we can get back to that little short span that we saw there for a while, for like 2 or 3 weeks, where Carter was not the every down back, but he was for sure getting like 60% of the workload. I think if we could get there, we'll be in a good spot. But I think for now, we have to consider him really as a high-end RB3. I think the passing down usage is very positive, but you have to keep an eye on Ty Johnson. If he comes back into the mix, then you could see the passing down work, go down.
Bengals took down the Broncos 15-10, covering as a 3-point dog, under cashed at 44. Prayers up for Teddy Bridgewater, suffered a scary injury, got put on a stretcher and carted off the field. Luckily, though, we have received reports already that, he has full mobility, and they're just saying it was concussion. So in the hospital and everything, but it sounds like it's not too bad for Teddy. So just wanted to get that out of the way. But first on the Bengals here, Joey Burrow, not the best game. It's hard to say anyone really balled out with just 15 total points scored, but we did see him at least win the game via a long hook up to Tyler Boyd, 56 yards to the house. And that was really their only high-end producer on the day. 5 catches, 96 yards, and a score for Boyd. I've seen them briefly use him in this way, where like the touchdown, he was kind of like lined up in the slot, but it was really close to the line of scrimmage. And they ran that play that's usually for tight ends, where they kind of run that like big wheel. They try to get like lost in kind of the mess, and then they emerge from the other side. And it was gorgeous because it's not a tight end. It's Tyler freaking Boyd, who's actually got some, juice in the open field. And it reminded me of the Jaguars game, which I believe was his other great performance this year. Like first play of the game, they do the play action boot, and instead of dumping it to a tight end in the flat, it was Tyler Boyd, and he took it like 40 yards instead of 15. So maybe that's the route in the future that they could kind of get Boyd more consistently involved in this offense, because it's not like this year, like he's been busting because he's had a ton of opportunities, not making any use out of it. It's been the opposite. He just hasn't he's been the clear-cut third option a year after, leading this entire offense in targets. But that's what happens when they just don't want to give the ball to Burrow. 22 pass attempts in this game, man. Like what are these receivers supposed to do? And it's been the story all year long. In 2020, Burrow had 10 games. He played 10 games. He threw the ball 35 plus times, and 8 of them, and the game he got hurt, he was at 34 in like the third quarter. So basically, 9 out of 10 games, he cleared 35 pass attempts. This year, in week 15, he's hit 35 pass attempts 4 times. So that's why Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, like even when they have been going well and having big weeks, neither of which happened today. T. Higgins, 2 catches, 23 yards. Jamar Chase, just 1 catch for 3 yards. I would note that he had a nice like 40-yard catch on a broken play that unfortunately got nullified on a hold. But man, like without this volume, Dwayne, it just becomes so tough to get behind these guys, and it's going to be a major problem, in trying to project them into 2022 and beyond, because as we always talk about, volume is the king, and right now in this run first Bengals offense, there's just not enough to go around for these 3 studly receivers. In the run game, though, we did see Joe Mixon, 17 carries, 58 yards, but once again, man, Samaje Perine was seeing more targets, and actually Mixon at the end of the game did get banged up. Happened twice. The first time he went in the locker room, quickly came back, got back out on the field, but then he once again got hurt and had to stay down extra long. He was moving around the sideline after, but it's definitely going to be something to keep an eye on ahead of week 16. But yeah, Dwayne, I don't think there's like too much new stuff to talk about in Cincy. No. We don't have much pass game volume, and it'd be a lot cooler if Mixon had the pass down rule.
Yeah, it's pretty much the same. It's like we've said. Perine's got the passing down work, and you got too many mouths to feed in an offense that just doesn't want to throw the ball enough. But like you're going to keep playing Higgins, you're going to keep playing Chase, like just because the boom is really big for both players. Just we haven't seen the bust that often with these two, especially in the same game. Usually one of them manages to go off, and this week it was kind of the anomaly. It was actually Tyler Boyd that went off.
Now, for the Broncos, mentioned Teddy getting hurt, was not doing much before. 98 passing yards on 22 pass attempts. We just were not seeing Teddy in the passing game get at all going. Drew Lock did Drew Lock things, man. And this is, I love Drew Lock. And it's not because I think he's going to be this great quarterback, but very few quarterbacks can be entertaining even when they suck. And that's what Drew Lock consistently brings to the table. How many quarterbacks do you know, Dwayne, that lose a fumble and then chase down the guy that just took the ball from them and get it back? Like, okay, it got overturned. The defensive lineman was ruled down. But man, we've seen Teddy 2 times this year, like have situations where he tried to tackle someone someone and it just didn't even come close. And like both times I like ironically just said like, Drew Lock makes that tackle. That's all I was going to say. Drew Lock actually did make the tackle when it was his chance to do so. And then at the end of the game, like 4th and 27 or whatever, you just need to give your guys a chance. I know it's not going to work out. Drew Lock throws the ball out of bounds, doesn't give anyone a chance to catch it. So are these good things for fantasy managers or the Denver Broncos? Absolutely not, but it's a lot more
He and Jerry Jeudy are nowhere near on the same page. I'll just say that. Like watching those two today, I was like, God, this is like kind of like getting the cold shoulder kind of thing.
That's
Judy's going one way, the ball's going another. It was bad.
That's been the most frustrating part for me, man. I know, like, I've been bitching and moaning about Cortland Sutton being number 5 on this offense in targets with Jerry Jeudy active for their, 7 games together this year. But I'd be so much more chill about this if, Sutton wasn't doing anything and Jeudy was balling out. But we just have gotten zeros out of everyone involved in this passing game. Drew Lock did manage to hit Tim Patrick for a nice 25-yard score. Cool contested catch situation where Tim Patrick proceeds to score and then just, hold his hand out like he was just insulting the cornerback for being too short. I found it hilarious, and NFL refs did not, so they threw a taunting flag. Dwayne, I hope, how were your kids in tears when they saw that? What was kind of the McFarland household's reaction, man? Just brutal?
No tears. No tears over it, but yeah, it's still brutal, of course. But yeah.
Dwayne, with all that said, man, the Jeudy pain, the Sutton pain, I think at this point, maybe the worst part is seeing Noah Fant and Albert O just completely cancel each other out. I tweeted this week, I want a petition, man, to have them just combined to be one person at this point because 10 targets, 8 catches, 115 combined yards, but they're splitting everything down the middle, as are Javonte Williams and Melvin Gordon. So at this point, Dwayne, Javonte and Melvin, I think they're going to continue to be right around that RB24 spot, but similar to the Bengals. I don't think much has really changed from this. Hopefully Teddy's back. If he's not, then I think we can, give moderate bumps to Patrick and Sutton. But even if Drew Lock's going to target them more often, we know the efficiency probably isn't going to be where we want it to be. I would just think, man, moving into week 16 and beyond, if you have a start-sit question, one of the players is a Bronco, other than the running backs probably, if one of your players is a pass catcher on the Broncos, I'm probably going to pick the other guy 9 times out of 10.
Yeah, and look, I know Jeudy and Sutton continue to be inside our top 50 receivers, but it's still just a talent thing. It's tough to get them much lower than that because we know how good of players they are. So yeah, they'll be interesting to look at. The Broncos just have to be all in on a quarterback. They've got to do like they did with Peyton Manning. They've got to go get another quarterback this offseason. They've got the weaponry. They've got a defense. This team, man, this team could be, with the right quarterback, we could be talking a Super Bowl candidate. That's how good this team can be. So they've just got to get something done there. Real quick on the backs, we've so this trend has happened for 3 weeks in a row now. I guess it's 2 weeks in a row because we had the non-Melvin Gordon week. But before that, so it's 3 out of the last 4 weeks, we've seen Javonte just really lead when both backs are available. Lead in the passing game. He did that again today. He handled 48% of the routes, only 26% to Gordon. Javonte Williams had 62% of the long down and distance, 80% of the 2-minute offense. So they're really splitting the carries, 45%, 45%, but Javonte really is the 1A now, and Melvin Gordon is the 1B on the offense. So I think Javonte, at this point, early in the year, we were just more likely to get a bust out of him. I think you're less likely to get that now because I think he's more game script. He's protected in game scripts because if the Broncos do trail, that passing down role is really going to come out and work for him. If they get ahead, we've seen it work for both backs. And if they're in close games, we've seen it work for both backs. So I think it's still a positive for Williams. I know we would all just love for him to have the whole role, but it's not happening, folks. It ain't happening this year. We'll see what happens if they bring Gordon back or not.
He had another just nasty highlight reel run. They were in their own end zone. And he finds a way to break 3 or 4 tackles on his way to gaining 11, 12 yards. It wasn't, the best run we've ever seen in NFL history where running back was starting off in their own end zone was Marion Barber about 14 years ago or so.
He's got some Lynch to him as well. There's some beast mode, kind of lurking with Javonte Williams. I'm very excited about his future.
You just see him rack up broken tackles, man. It's not like he's just making the first guy miss. He's making the first 3. So fun to watch. And, it
is fun.
Awfully young. Here's to hoping all wheels up in 2022. Just final note. I didn't think it was really a drop, but it was it put in the area. Courtland Sutton could have had a 35-yard score. I believe it was thrown by Teddy earlier in the game. Right on the money, like it basically was hitting him in the chest, but Eli Apple also just had really good coverage and shot his hand in at the last second. So we got close with Sutton, but yeah, it's impossible to trust him as anything more than a boom or more likely bust wide receiver 4 at best here moving forward. 2 more games, only had 9 on this slate, so Dwayne and I think, are actually going to keep this under 2 hours. For once, 49ers took down the Falcons 31-13. This one was just not all that close. Excellent game from Jimmy Garoppolo, and it's been more good than bad for Jimmy ever since they got all their weapons back about halfway through the year. Obviously, Kittle was hurt, and Ayuk, was just chilling in Kyle Shanahan's doghouse. So you put everyone in this offense, good things tend to happen. So shout out to Jimmy G, just 5 incompletions on 23 attempts, 235 yards and a score. Unfortunately, we just didn't get like a bigger fantasy performance because when they got down near the end zone, we had Jeff Wilson scoring a rushing touchdown. Deebo Samuel get another rushing touchdown. Even Kyle Juszczyk had a 6-yard rushing score. So George Kittle got his with 6 catches for 93 yards. It was great to see Deebo Samuel not back to normal as a receiver, but at least getting 4 catches for 60 yards. Like Dwayne, week 10 was the last time before today that he had even more than 1 catch in a game. So slight improvement from Deebo. Now, the problem is that Brandon Ayuk ended up being the odd man out of the situation. Just 1 catch for 36 yards. So they're going to go ahead and face the... Who do they have next week? It's not they have the Texans in 2 weeks. They have the Titans on Thursday. So the way the Titans are playing, man, it's not a guarantee that Jimmy G is going to be forced to throw the ball 30, 40 times. Clearly, Kittle is the alpha. He deserves to be it right now. But just realize with Deebo and Ayuk, a little bit of a question in terms of who's going to be the guy, particularly with Juwan Jennings, man, more and more becoming a consistent part of this offense. He did score a short touchdown himself. 6 targets, tied for the team high with George Kittle. But I feel like we kind of know. We know Deebo, he's doing his rushing thing. 6 carries, 29 yards, another score. And he leads the league, man. 7 yards per carry is absolutely bonkers. 5.5 after contact. Trails only a true stud in Duke Johnson and missed tackles forced per carry. But man, it's Jeff Wilson, the usage that is really sticking out to me here. 21 carries, 110 yards, and a touchdown. Hopefully you kept going back to the well with this guy. I know he's disappointed us in his previous 2 fantasy starts. But for once, man, they were willing to keep him on the field the whole time. I mean, JaMychal Hasty had 1 carry, ripped off a nice 13-yard gain. Really wasn't seen from again. So I would hope, Dwayne, that Elijah Mitchell is ready to go by next week. He was someone that seemed to be trending a little bit better, working off on the side. With that said, it is a quick turnaround back to Thursday night. With this usage, man, it's going to be hard to keep Jeff Wilson out of that RB1 zone.
Yeah, and this is why utilization matters. Because even last week, this is almost the same utilization as last week. As far as his routes are a little higher this week at 60%, but the rushing attempts are the same, 66%. He was right around 60% last week. But remember, last week, the Niners, even though they were leading, they decided to throw the ball. And so there was just the pie wasn't as large for Wilson to get all the carries. I think he had 12 or 13 last week. The same basic role turned into 21 carries today, and the same type of script leading. And again, so that's where utilization can help you, not get off of a player too soon, or maybe get over onto a player quicker, whenever you're seeing these sort of things happen. So I use Wilson today for sure, in everywhere that I could. Almost every DFS lineup I had him in there just because we know it's a run heavy offense with the Niners, and the role looked really good. Juszczyk, yes, did steal a touchdown on the first drive. Then Deebo, the next drive down, stole the touchdown. So he's not going to get all the touchdowns. But still, he's in a good spot where I think he's for sure a rock solid RB2, but I think he gives you that upside to get to RB1 territory, as any 49er running back does, because of how much they like to run the ball. Deebo Samuel, 92% of the routes this week, so that was an increase. Last week he didn't get over 80%. And then to your point, over the last several games, only has had over the last 3 weeks, healthy, getting rid of the game where he left early with the groin injury, 8% target share over that stretch, 23% today. So that was definitely a bump up. And his rushing attempts are right where they've been over that same 3-game stretch. 21% of the design rushing plays have gone to Deebo Samuel, 19% today. So it looks like he's basically locked into this role of he's going to see 20% of the rushing attempts because he's done it with Mitchell, he's done it with Wilson, He's done it with everybody. So that role's probably staying there. More the thing that's going to be up or down every week, right, is what's going to happen for sure with, Deebo Samuel's receiving workload. Now, he has been huge against zone, not as big against man coverage. So I haven't even looked at the next two matchups of, I think who did you say? The Texans?
Titans and Texans. Yeah.
Titans.
AFC South. Let's go.
Okay, yeah. So neither one of those are super heavy in zone or man. They're more balanced. So we'll have to wait and see. But Samuel comes through with a rushing touchdown again. Like, you just can't – I guess you just can't stop him. Like, at some point, I don't see how this continues to work, and that's going to hurt Deebo when it doesn't come through. But maybe the 23% target share is encouraging enough that, we could see another 30, 35% or like what we got used to seeing early in the season from Samuel. But right now, we know it's just George Kittle's world, right? Like, the rest of the 49ers are just living in a 27% target share. Yeah, I know it's down from the previous 2 weeks where he was at 41% and 41% both of those weeks. But, man, Kittle, 34% of the air yards, 4.4 yards per route run. Like, he is just going complete beast mode right now on everything. So Kittle, if you've got him, good for you. Like, you're like, it's just a huge advantage, man. Like, to have a tight end playing this way. I know we had Kelsey and Andrews go off this week, so Kittle won't be as highly ranked. But if you've got him in your fantasy playoffs, you're in a great spot.
Great tweet. Great Twitter account. Kyle at Knicks_tape99. I don't even know who this guy is or what he does. I think he does some stuff with Underdog Fantasy. But anyway, he tweeted, Kittle is a bull in a china shop every time he gets the ball. And I could not describe it better. That's what he is, man. And it is just a joy to watch him continuously break one tackle after another. Now, this game included, I think, the worst beat of the week in terms of just gambling gone wrong, and that was if you had over 47.5, because the Falcons had drives end at the 1 yard line twice, and then another one at the 8 yard line on failed fourth down conversions. So, this was a game where, you see the 31-13 score, and you kind of assume the Falcons just got smashed, but it really was not fluky per se. The 49ers did a good job stopping them, but you could have, seen how a couple plays go differently, and Atlanta at least would not be getting blown out. And it started from the beginning because Atlanta recovers a fumble on the opening kickoff. Kyle Pitts gets, right to like the 1 inch line or so. Cordero Patterson originally gets a goal line touchdown, kind of questionably overturned, ruled just short, and then 2 more incompletions, another stuff, 0 points on a drive that was at the 1 yard line with 4 downs to go. And this was a disappointing game from my guy, CPAT. I couldn't have Duke and Cordero in the same week, Dwayne. I get it. The fantasy football gods work in mysterious ways. This is one of them. But it's also not that surprising, man. Cordero, 11 carries, 18 yards, only had 2 targets. We've talked about this. Since coming back from his ankle injury, they, really haven't been willing to use him as much as a receiver. He's still the lead back, as a rusher. Mike Davis only had 6 carries in this one. With that said, I think the days of having Patterson, close to that RB1 borderline are certainly over. He should be ranked much closer to RB24 than he is RB12. And that's how we had it going in this week. So again, nothing too surprising, but he was able to score touchdowns in previous weeks and really didn't dud like this. And this is what happens when you're basically reduced to an early down grinder without much of a pass game role. Luckily, the Falcons have given us, in return for losing a little bit of Patterson's luster, a truly high-end wide receiver 3 at this point. Russell Gage caught 8 of 11 targets, 91 yards in the score. This was incredible, man. Like, he showed off some good route running. Yeah. Last week, he had a 6 sluggo, had a big gain deep. But this one, man,
it wasn't even the route running. In this one, the jump balls.
It was like 3 or 4 of them, man. Yeah. Holy crap. The touchdown completely mossed the guy. He had another big one downfield, bailed out Matt Ryan another time or two. So, Ryan, I didn't think really had a very good game. He hit an awesome deep ball to Olamide Zaccheaus for 49 yards. And then same thing to Kyle Pitts down the sideline for a nice 49-yard gain. That was cool to see Pitts get a little something going. 4 catches, 77 yards. But yeah, man, Russell Gage really has just emerged as the number 1 receiver in this offense, particularly with Cordero Patterson taking such a big step back. Also had Tajay Sharp suffering a foot injury. But Dwayne, like, the reason I think we were kind of a little bit more not out on Gage throughout the year, but looking at this offense 6 weeks ago, it looked like, okay, CPAT and Pitts are going to be the top 2 pass game options. We'll see what Gage can get after that. Right now, man, Gage is their number 1 pass game option. It's becoming harder and harder not to just put him in the wide receiver 2 conversation itself.
Yeah, I mean, I think we were actually probably we were pretty bullish on Gage versus like where most people in the industry were. So hopefully a lot of the folks listening were able to get on board with Russell Gage like about 4 or 5 weeks ago when we were talking about his targets per route run against man and zone and all the impressive things that he was doing as far as his open rates, all the underlyings. Like this guy's #1 in the league right now against press man coverage getting open. Like he's slightly ahead of Keenan Allen. Now he has less routes, but now you're seeing all this come to fruition like on the field. So I do think that Russell Gage is a player that, through Ridley being out has gotten to really show off like his skill set. And, I don't even know what his contract situation looks like, Ian. I have to go look at it. Like I know this got to be like year 4, I would think, for Russell Gage, maybe year 5. But anyway, like, so this could be it could be another player that all of a sudden either ends up with a larger role here or ends up in another destination next year and actually is a big contributor for an offense. But 39% target share today, 43% of the air yards, 11.2 average depth of target, 18% of his targets came 20 yards or more down the field, 47% of the time he's working in the slot, but he also works outside. Kyle Pitts, last week we saw his routes per dropback drop down. They did get back up this week over the 85% threshold. Targets per route run over the 20%, which is what we want to see, 25% of the target. So Pitts, again, having a nice year for a rookie tight end, just not quite what everybody really wanted, right? Whenever you drafted him in the first 4 rounds of your fantasy, or first 5 rounds of your fantasy football draft. And then lastly, just real quick on CPAT, like the routes are still there, Ian. I didn't get to break down, like, I don't know if you already did, but I haven't got to break down like how many of them came outside, but 55% is about where he's been, 55 to 60%. So I don't want to close the door. I do think some of it could be to do with injury, but I think he should, hopefully be getting healthy, about now. Like didn't grade out very well today, in really any facet of the game, like rushing a 48.3, receiving a 53.3 PFF grade. So, it could be to do with the injury, not performing as well, but all the underlying utilization is still there. 61% of the snaps versus 46% for Mike Davis. Rushing attempts, 58% versus 32%. But I think, to your point, I think the biggest change here is they're giving him so much more of a workload on the ground. It's almost like, do they want to protect him and do they just not want to pile on too many touches to CPAT? Like that's the only thing that I can think of. But you would think in a game where you're just trying to win to hang on to any kind of chance, you would see CPAT getting more involved in the passing game, but we didn't see that today.
Yeah, I don't even think he's not even returning kicks. The best kick returner of all time wasn't returning kicks. So like something is clearly going on with their usage with CPAT. Again, he's still the lead running back here, so we're not, saying you need to completely fade the guy moving forward. Just keep in mind that ceiling isn't quite as high. And yeah, Dwayne, Russell Gage, unrestricted free agent in 2022. I know Michael Gallup is kind of being one of the main headliners of that, at least the one that we talk about a lot. I'm sure Allen Robinson has a good chance to bounce back as well, amongst many other guys I'm forgetting. Chris Godwin as well, who hopefully, by the way, questionable to return. Doesn't seem that bad. But now Mike Evans is doubtful with a hamstring injuries. So Buccaneers wide receivers dropping like flies. But yes, Russell Gage, someone that, hey, when we keep on keeping on throughout free agency, if we see some team lob, $30 million over a couple years his way, he could be a sneaky solid late round target in 2022. Final game, I think the most entertaining one of the day. Packers took down the Ravens 31-30. Baltimore covering as a 9.5-point favorite, thanks to some of the heroics from Tyler Huntley, over cashed at 45. Aaron Rodgers, largely just excellent. Again, this offense has now scored 31 or more points in 4 straight games. And Rodgers had a couple throws to Marquez Valdes-Scantling that were just truly unbelievable. He put one down the right sideline with 3 defenders intervening. And he threw one down the middle where like
the one down the seam with the safety over the top, like, and the linebacker underneath was that is like, that's what pinpoint accuracy looks like.
I wouldn't even try to make that throw in a video game like after a bottle of wine. And Rodgers is like out there absolutely just nailing it. So great game from Rodgers, 268 yards and 3 touchdowns. Just missed on 2 throws. Like first drive of the game, Adams ran a sluggo and got wide open deep. I don't think it would have been a score, but you never know. It's Devontae Adams. Minimum 40-yard gain, but Rodgers sailed it. And then later in the game, Allen Lazard was open in the corner of the end zone. Blown coverage where guys like ran up on the ball in the flat. Rodgers just sailed it out the back of the end zone. Missed them. That one especially hurt because it would have set the team passing touchdown record. But depending on, are they in Lambeau next week? That could be a blessing in disguise. Yeah, in Lambeau against the Browns next week. Now he gets to break Favre's all-time passing touchdown at home in front of the crowd. They'll give him a standing O, probably beg him to stay for a little more time. That's what they got to do, Dwayne. Like Green Bay Nation, when Rodgers throws that touchdown, you got to start chanting like 1 more year or 5 more years or whatever the hell. You guys figure it out, but that's what I think about that. But look, we know Devontae is a beast. 6 catches, 44 yards in his score. The touchdown was kind of crazy because it's like, how do you let Devontae Adams score at this point? You know he's great, but like, wouldn't you realize Rodgers is going to throw him the ball? The corner had inside help, and Devontae's route running was so damn good. He still got the cornerback to bite on the inside before he went outside. He did it to him
twice. He did it to him again like 2 drives later, like when they needed a first down.
And I get it. This is nothing but backup corners for Baltimore at this point. Jimmy Smith was a late guy that needed to be ruled out with COVID. Obviously, Humphreys and Peters out of the picture as well. But truly, just some of the routes that he puts on the film are a sight to behold. Mentioned that sluggo that unfortunately didn't amount to anything earlier in the game. And also shout out Marquez Valdes-Scantling, benefiting from those throws from Rodgers. But at the same time, caught a touchdown on a slant where we're seeing more and more them treat MVS as like a true number 2 receiver as opposed to just a glorified field stretcher option. So MVS more and more, man, I think is starting to flirt with that wide receiver 3 borderline, if not in the top 36 already. And we know just having Aaron Rodgers under center that he's going to win some of those start-sit battles and close contests. If it's close, people pick the better offense, and I think you won't be disappointed a large percentage of the time. Only other point, Allen Lazard, he did get hurt briefly. He almost made this sick one-handed catch in the end zone, but he did come back in. So again, check out the waiver wire episode. It's always out on Tuesday. We'll have a better grasp on the league-wide injuries. But I believe both offenses managed to make it through relatively scot-free. Also, I think Mark Andrews was fine as well. But Dwayne, I think the big question here is what to make of this running back situation. We've seen it kind of go back and forth in recent weeks. This one, Aaron Jones had 13 carries to A.J. Dillon's 7. We did see Jones lead the way in targets 2-1. A.J. Dillon, though, and this to me actually means at least a little something, like they have him out there on the hands team, so they must be okay throwing him the ball if they're putting him out there for onside kicks, and he did recover it to ultimately end the game. So what does the utilization say behind the scenes? Because going in this week, I think I at least had both Dillon and Jones in my top 24, and it does appear like they're splitting things enough where if we can just get kind of more pure running back volume, I think both these guys can continue to produce at a fairly high level.
Yeah, so really in the last 2 games with Aaron Jones back, from his MCL injury, we had seen Dillon continue with the role that he had before, whenever Jones was out, which was handling over 60% of the rushing attempts. And that changed today. Today we saw Aaron Jones get 62% of the snaps, 49% of the routes, and 62% of the rushing attempts to only 33% for A.J. Dillon. Dillon's a nice player, but he's not explosive enough for me to continue to grade as a low-end RB2 if his rushing attempts are going to drop to the 33% range. I'm not going to make the move on him this week. I know we don't have that many weeks left, but we could see more of a balanced approach, next week. But this is actually what we saw more so early in the season with the way they were using Aaron Jones. Now, one thing I have noted that's different is all of the short down and distance, 100% going to A.J. Dillon now. So that is your 3rd down, 4th down, 1 to 2 yards to go. Again, also captures a lot of your goal line type carries. Those are going to Dillon, but he hasn't been good on them, Ian. He struggles to really punch the ball in. What I noticed with Dillon is he's not a real violent runner, at the point of contact.
He's got to get going a little bit.
He needs the build-up speed. He's not that instantaneous, explosiveness. And Jones gives you that. So I'm almost wondering, I don't know. Aaron Jones has done really well playing down inside the 5 for his career, and I think that's a big part of it. Yeah, could he get injured because he's a smaller guy? Potentially, but man, he can get from 0 to 100 really fast, whereas Dillon can't do that. So
and I also wonder, Dwayne, if we're playing a video game and we're on the 1 yard line, you don't put goal line 3 tight ends and try to just ram it in there in this 11-man box. What do you usually do? You spread it out and you try to run against a 7-man box. And I think when Aaron Jones is back there, they're probably more likely to spread guys out versus Dillon. And just because I'm kind of catching myself here, I'm not trying to say that me playing video games, I know more than LaFleur and the Packers. They're a very good offense. They're very good at what they do. I'm just saying, like, again, I love when teams spread it out at the goal line versus just bunching things up. Like when the Patriots started doing that a couple years ago, coming out on goal line and then spreading things out. I just think there's a lot more you can do instead of just jumbling everyone up into this big, like, rugby-esque mosh pit. But apologies on that rant. Go ahead.
No, you got to establish it, though. No, I think it's just a matter of, there's more than one way to do these things. And I think, honestly, like, the best way is to be able to always keep your opponent guessing. And you can really do it either way, right? And then depending on the matchup and what you think is going to be best for your team, that's the way you can approach it. So we'll have to wait and see here with how they want to handle these backs. But right now, I think it's encouraging, for if you're an Aaron Jones fantasy manager and you're in the play, you managed to make it into the playoffs despite him missing some time at the end. I think this is a positive for him. I kind of lean to the fact that this probably is going to be more what it's going to look like, just because this was how it looked early in the season. To me, it kind of looks like they were letting Aaron Jones ease his way back in. But again, one data point, we could see it go back to like a 50-50 type thing next week. So I don't want to get like overly carried away with it. But MVS, you mentioned him earlier, in the passes that Rodgers was able to hit him with, 79% of the routes. But the key thing, led the team in air yards again, 51% of the air yards for the day. And he was tied for first in target share at 23%. So it's pretty much like either Valdez Scantling or Alan Lazard. One of these two guys is like going to do something like each week. Like we know Devontae Adams is going to get his, but there's a good chance of one of these other two. We can't always tell you which one it's going to be. Like that's the problem with it. But because they don't run enough plays to really support three weapons unless they just get into an absolute like shootout mode. But I think Valdez Scantling like is a picture perfect like wide receiver boom bust play, like high end wide receiver 4, because I think like his range of outcomes, like he gives you a top 12 performance, because he can come down with, he hasn't came down with a lot. He's been injured much of the year, but now we're starting to see him healthy. And so I like the way they're using him. It's not just as a deep threat, even though he does have a high ADOT, like he's doing some different things as well. So I'm encouraged with what I'm seeing from MVS.
Should also be encouraged by what we saw from Tyler Huntley in this Ravens offense as a whole. I mean, this group, since in week 9, they beat the Vikings 34-31. But here are the points scored by this offense, which includes, 2 games from Huntley and 3 from Lamar. 10, 16, 16, 19, 22. Like that was the problem here. Like it wasn't, we kind of knew Huntley had this dual threat ability and everything, but this offense just looks so bad. And when you're facing a Green Bay defense that has looked really, elite for large portions of the year, despite not having Jair Alexander and Zadarius Smith, I think it was reasonable to be a little bit lower on Huntley than usual. Throw in just the fact that we didn't know until Jay Glazer, awesome. Again, told us right before 1 o'clock that Huntley will be starting and not Lamar Jackson. I understand that people weren't fully able to get behind what ended up being arguably the best fantasy. I think it probably will be the best fantasy performance of the week. 73 yards on the ground, 2 scores, also chipped in 215 passing yards and another 2 scores, both of which went to our guy, Mark Andrews. 10 catches, 136 yards and 2 touchdowns. We all assumed when Travis Kelce had that monster Thursday night game, I was like, all right, Kelce's back. He's going to get his fantasy tight end 1 spot back. Andrews isn't going down without a fight, so it's going to be really fun to watch how that finishes up throughout the year. And I just really hope that you guys have listened when we say Kittle, Andrews, Gronk, Kelce. These guys, if you have 4 of them, then try to convince your commissioner to add a flex because they need to all be in a starting lineup, even if you are blessed enough to have 2 of fantasy's top 4 tight ends. So Andrews, if you want to rank him as the overall tight end 1, tight end 2, I don't care. Just start him in lineups of all shapes and sizes for the love of God. He is so good. And I mean, Andrews, as a rookie, man, I was really impressed with his ability after the catch. I didn't necessarily see that as much like last year. He's still scoring touchdowns and everything, but especially lately this year, man, there's nothing this guy can't do at a very high level. He has, again, just been a joy to watch for the better part of the entire season, particularly in this last 4 to 6 week hot stretch. But we also saw Mark Andrews had 13 targets, Marquise Brown 14, but he put up his version of like a Jalen Waddle, Rondale Moore stat line, caught 10 of them for just 43 scoreless yards, only a long of 7 in this one. So this is kind of, I guess, it's not bad. I mean, in full PPR, like we'll take 10 catches 8 days of the week. You just would like to see that boom come to fruition a little bit better. Not saying it won't be there. I mean, last week he was open for about a 40-yard touchdown. Huntley just sailed it. If anything, I just think it's positive that Lamar, who I would expect to be back next week, but hey, maybe he gets hurt again or whatever. In the future now, knowing when Tyler Huntley's under center, I mean, this passing game has looked good the last 2 weeks, but when we saw him against the Bears, man, it was much more hit or miss. I think we don't need to really downgrade, particularly Andrews and Browns, all that much when it goes from Lamar to Huntley, particularly when we're going from a banged up Lamar to Huntley as well. So, God forbid there's no talking heads on the internet or wherever tomorrow talking about, an actual QB competition in Baltimore. But at a minimum, I think they found themselves a very solid backup quarterback, particularly one we can lean on in Fantasyland. Unfortunately, it continues to be just Andrews and Hollywood. Rashad Bateman, just 2 targets, caught one of them for 5 yards in this one. So, Dwayne, we got Andrews balling out. We all know that. Huntley giving us some nice dual threat. Maybe he'll be, on that QB1 borderline here without Lamar. But again, I feel like Lamar is going to be back next week. The real big takeaway from this from a fantasy perspective, our Devontae Freeman RB2 days are gone, man. Latavius Murray got the start. I got worried, and he just kept on getting fed. At the end of the day, man, it was only Latavius 8 touches to Freeman 6. Freeman 7 touches. So they were still close, but we can't have close in an offense that has a quarterback this involved on the ground, whether it's Huntley or Lamar. This is bad, Dwayne. It's bad.
Yeah, Freeman still led the way, 55% of the snaps. But yeah, rushing attempts, 33% to Freeman, 39% to Murray, and then Tyler Huntley handled 28% of the designed rushing attempts. So you got really this 3-headed monster. And Freeman's still out there for the passing down work, 54% along down distance, 78% of the 2-minute offense. So, technically he's still the lead back, but yeah, that's just too much work for Murray because really it had just been, Murray had been down in like the 20% range. And so we felt comfortable with Freeman with it being like that. So yeah, I think this is a downgrade for Freeman. It's only 1 week of data, but we have to react to what we have, right? We don't have much time left, for the season. So it does look like a situation where we're probably going to see more of a committee. Freeman continues to be the lead guy, but like by how much? We just don't really know. And then on Huntley, the other nice thing, if he does get another start, I already mentioned the 28% design rush attempts, but also a 16% scramble rate today. So the dude is really using his legs. We didn't see it quite as much.
They could not contain him, man. It was insane.
No, he looked great. Good for him, man. Somebody needs to be looking at this dude, at Tyler Huntley. He's definitely got some talent. So I think Denver would love to have Tyler Huntley, right now.
Love it.
He could be their starting quarterback easily. Rashad Bateman didn't come up in the box score for you, only 1 target, 1 reception, but 98% of the routes per drop back, that is a season high for him. So just knowing that he's out there enough, in the Ravens offense, is good enough, he could come through with a boom week. It's not like we're saying that Rashad Bateman, thank you, social team, for making, my thing on the hustle this week. The one thing they pick is somehow Rashad Bateman's going to break out. And I'm all the context is
all the hours you've talked this week. That's the one.
Yeah, that's the one. Anyway, but Bateman, it is encouraging to see him be out there. I know he didn't get the targets like you mentioned. Marquise Brown, 39% of the targets, 33% to Mark Andrews. And with Marquise Brown, what I'll say is look, we know the guy hasn't lost his speed. So it's all still there. It's just a matter of the way these games have worked out. I'll take these targets, and I think they're an encouraging thing. Eventually the deep ball is going to be there. Eventually the big run after the catch play is going to be there. We just need them to keep feeding him. So overall for me with Marquise Brown, I love this. Just knowing that he's staying involved, even though he's not coming up, he didn't come up with a big play today. They kept going back to him. That's encouraging.
He's got at least 4 catches in all but 1 game this year, and that game was the infamous 3-drop touchdown. 2, one of them got tipped against the Lions all the way back in week 3.
Yeah,
still talking about it. Just like anyone that wants
right in front of him.
Anyone that wants to talk about Julio Jones not scoring a touchdown this year, please go back and review that week 2 one against the Seahawks. So people don't forget, as we have found out over the years. People, hope you enjoyed this edition of PFF Fantasy Podcast. If you did, I invite you to go on over to pff.com and get a subscription. Use code FANTASY and you can get 25% off either Edge or Elite subscription. And what can you get with that? I'm happy you asked. All of our locked article content, betting dashboard, 0 to 100 grades of every single player, our player prop tool, wide receiver cornerback tool, all that and much more. Support the pod and use promo code FANTASY for 25% off any sub. And also the holiday season is here. And because the Fantasy Podcast listeners are the best of all the PFF podcasts. We want your help to create a list of what PFF should build for you. Please email us at contact@pff.com. Again, contact@pff.com with the answers to these questions. What PFF feature do you love the most? And what do you want most from PFF? Again, contact@pff.com, and tell us which podcast sent you so that we can put your ideas into the wish list for 2022. Fun promo for DraftKings trying to get in there. Don't just deposit money. Use this promo and they'll give you a bunch of free money in return. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use promo code PFF. Bet just $1 on any team to score and win $100 in free bets. If they score, you score with promo code PFF this week at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Must be 21 or older. New Jersey, Indiana, or Pennsylvania. Only new customers only. Minimum $5 deposit, $1 wager, one per customer. Restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. Also got to shout out our friends at Western Southern. One of the best deals I have seen pitched on this podcast. Literally all you have to do, people, is submit a question at westernsouthern.com/askchris. You can ask about Chris's football career, working with Al Michaels. Maybe you just want to know how to, not be broke and try to save money. Western Southern can help you with all that, as can Chris. One more time, that's westernsouthern.com/askchris. And what do you get in return? Every submission earns you a chance to win the ultimate feast to celebrate football's favorite Sunday. They will cover your catering up to $2,500. Coordinate your order from a restaurant near you and have it delivered on February 13th, 2022 for Super Bowl Sunday. You can check out the answers on the Chris Collinsworth podcast as well as Western Southern's Instagram each and every week. Remember, Western Southern, you can rest assured on game day. Now, Dwayne, usually after this podcast, there's one game left in the week. Because of freaking COVID, there are 4. Raiders, Browns, Vikings, Bears, Washington, Philly, Seattle, Rams. Just a few notes that have popped up. We've already broken these games down. We'll be on Twitter to try to help answer some last minute start sits, but I get it at this point. Not too much to do except pray to the fantasy gods and hope for the best. But we did see the Bears lose number 1 cornerback Jalen Johnson, the COVID list. Like Justin Jefferson, if you want to set his projection at 200 receiving yards, you might not be far off. Also a note in Washington, Philly, Terry McLaurin as well as Jalen Hurts practiced in full on Sunday. So really expecting both those guys to start. It's been tough. I saw so many Taysom versus Jalen Hurts questions. If you decide to take the safe route, I don't blame you. With that said, it does really seem like Jalen Hurts is going to be starting come Tuesday. And then also with the Seattle Seahawks versus the Rams, Jalen Ramsey did get activated off the COVID list. The only wide receivers that he has shadowed for the Rams over the past 2 years, Devontae Adams, Mike Evans, and DK Metcalf. Does that mean you should fade Metcalf? Of course not. Metcalf has scored 2 touchdowns in each of his last 2 meetings against the Rams. Obviously, Tyler Lockett remains on the COVID list. So situation where, maybe if you want to tick down the projection just a tad, go ahead. But keep in mind, tiebreaker, not a rule with these wide receiver cornerback matchups. So, Dwayne, any major takeaways, thoughts, notes, comments, criticisms, wherever the hell is on your mind for these 4 games?
No, I just don't want to hear any more COVID inactives. Like doing the Spaces thing on Thursday, and then Andrew and I did it again this morning. Like, I feel for people. Like, I've never had to give so many if-then type analyses, right? Where everything kind of has a caveat. Well, it's this if this player goes, but if this guy's out, well, then this guy moves up, and with all these games being late, like people's hands are kind of tied, got to make a decision early. Like, I had to use Ben Roethlisberger today over Jalen Hurts in a couple of spots. Now, like, after seeing what Ben did, like, you're just like, man, I would just risk it all on Jalen Hurts if I knew I was going to get like 11 points from Ben Roethlisberger. So I just feel for everybody. It's like you said, just hoping that, the fantasy gods, look down on us all tomorrow and they don't give us any more of these last minute COVID-19, issues. I guess the good news, if it does come down, you do at least have 4 games, right? Once we start hearing this stuff tomorrow. So hopefully you can make some sort of a pivot.
And it does sound like with the new COVID rules, they're going to instigate, whether or not you think they're good for the health of humanity in the league. It does sound like that vaccinated players not showing symptoms, like we shouldn't see as many guys get added to the list. But who knows? I'm knocking on wood as I say that. I want everyone to be healthy and not have COVID. That's the goal. Dwayne, anything else you want to get off your chest?
No, man. That's it.
We will be back on Tuesday with our waiver wire pod. Then we'll be back Wednesday breaking down every single Week 16 game. And then Friday, DFS goodness. And Friday evening, we will have more injury talk. So for Dwayne, I'm Ian. Hope everyone has a great holiday season and fantasy playoff success. And until next time, take care, everybody.